Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be reading The Mesmer Menace by Kirsten Hamilton and illustrations by James Hamilton. So, before we begin, we should always think to ourselves, what do we know about a story just by looking at it? So, this story is a steampunk genre. Think of what a steampunk subgenre could mean to you. What clues do you get by looking at the picture? What do you think this story is going to be about? The narrator in the story is a type of dog called a dachshund. So if we're talking about the narrator is the dog, that means the story is going to be told from the dog's point of view. Think to yourself, what do you know about dachshunds and what do you know about dogs? And how would the narrator's voice affect how the story is going to go? Okay, let's go ahead and read.
Dismantled. When we reached the kitchen, a chill went down my spine. All of the automatons were still, but Knives was not just frozen in place. He was frozen in several places at once. Someone had taken off his arms. His wicked-looking bladed attachments were lying silent and useless on opposite sides of the room. Wally ran his hand through his hair. We need the automatons, and the automatons need power. To the lab, Noodles.
So for those of you who do not know, an automaton, this word here, is kind of like a machine or a robot, but runs by itself. Let's look at a few of the things we see here, but Knives was not just frozen in place. Notice how Knives has a capital K in front of it. So do you think it's actually talking about Knives as in the item, or do you think it's a name? Seeing as we see our context clues where it says he was frozen in several places at once, we can assume it is going to be part of a name. That is using our context clues. I know we've talked a lot about monitoring and clarifying, so that's one thing we need to do as we read this. We are going to read the first 3 chapters, by the way.
Chapter 1. Danger. I should have smelled it. Mayhem, most feathered and foul, was coming. I should have smelled it. But I didn't. I smelled bacon and sausage, eggs and waffles, toast and tea. The scents we awoke to every morning at the Kennewicket's amazing automated inn. My name is Noodles. I'm a dachshund. On Saturday, October 19th, 1902, the day the Great Mesmer War began, I was sitting on Wally Kennewicket's lap in the lobby as he perused the pages of an old Scientific American. Wally was reading an article about Percy Pilcher's last flight in his man-sized glider, the Hawk. Pilcher had built a powered plane, Noodles, Wally said, but a mechanical malfunction forced him to fly the Hawk that fateful morning instead.
So let's pause and think about our story here. So we said my name is Noodles and Dachshund. We were talking about the narrator earlier. So who do you think Wally is in this sentence? It says Wally was reading an article. Think to yourself as you sit there and say, I was sitting on Wally Kenwick's lap. So more than likely, Wally is his owner.
You learn a lot of interesting phrases living with the Kennewickets. Phrases like mechanical malfunction, retractable rail cannon, and flee for your life were used quite frequently around the inn. I wish they'd published Pilcher's blueprints for the powered plane, Wally went on. I licked his ear. Manned, powered, and controlled flight in a contraption that was heavier than air was an achievement that had thus far eluded the world's most courageous adventurers and intelligent engineers. It was Wally Kennewicket's dream to be the first to achieve it. I did not approve. Flight was far too dangerous. Percy Pilcher's perilous pursuit had ended when the Hawk's tail failed, and Percy plunged to his death. Wally took his journal from his pocket. He noted, "Tail failure may cause tragedy." I was pondering the profundity of this observation when destiny knocked on the door. Wally tucked his journal back in his pocket, set me on the couch, and stood up to answer it. I barked. "Jump, boy," Wally said. "You can do it." My wagger went wild. It always does when Wally says, "You can do it." But wagging wouldn't get me to the floor. There are things that nature never intended a dachshund to do. Flinging oneself off a couch is certainly on the list. I raced from one armrest to the other, barking madly until Wally came back and lifted me down. Wally Kennewicket is the kind of boy who comes through when you need him. Once all 4 paws were safely on the polished marble floor, I raced ahead of him to the door, expecting to find a very important person on the steps. Scientists, businessmen, and engineers come to the inn from all over the world, eager to ask for advice from Wally's parents, Oliver and Calypso Kennewicket. Oliver and Calypso are inventors extraordinaire.
So let's think about a few things we read in this section. What did we learn about Wally, and what did we learn about our friend the new dog? Whenever you're reading, make sure you monitor and clarify to see if you understand what's going on. If you have any questions, write them down, and during our WebEx meeting, we can talk about it.
Extraordinaire means that they're amazing. Oliver and Calypso invented everything in the inn, from the dust bunnies to the gyrating generator and the amazing automatons. An automaton is a self-operating machine. The Kennewickets are currently perfecting several new designs. When Wally opened the door that morning, we didn't find a scientist, leader of industry, or engineer on the step, however. We found a hobo. The collar of his ragged coat was turned up, and the brim of his dusty hat was pulled down. I could just make out a bulb of a nose above a bushy mustache, and perhaps the flash of spectacles. "Walter Kennewicket," the hobo said, "I must see your parents at once. It's a matter of utmost importance." It wasn't surprising that a hobo would know Wally's name. The Kennewickets were always kind to hobos. "Yes, sir," Wally said politely. "Would you wait in the lobby while I find them?" "Of course." The hobo looked at me. "Is this fine fellow your dog?" "My best friend," Wally corrected. "His name is Noodles." "I'll return shortly, sir." I wanted to follow Wally, but felt it might be best if I waited with our guest. The automated inn is conveniently located near a branch of the Union Pacific Railroad, so I had observed many hobos. Some of them were nice, ordinary people. Others put things in their pockets when no one was watching. If our visitor was that sort of hobo, he would soon find out that dachshunds are very good at watching. This hobo didn't try to slip anything in his pockets. He patted my head, then walked to the fireplace to ponder the portrait of a pigeon that hung above the mantel. Half of the Kennewicket clan have a particular passion for the birds. Wally's almost grown-up cousin, Melvin Kennewicket, has a shelf full of pigeon racing trophies. Melvin's twin sister, Prissy, has half a shelf of trophies. They'd inherited this peculiar pastime from their father, Wentworth Kennewicket, who, being Oliver's elder brother, technically owned the inn.
So let's think about a few things we learn in this passage. I want you to start doing this by yourself as you read, but we see that there is a hobo coming in there. A hobo is usually a homeless person. We also see that while his family is very nice to hobos, which is very unlikely in times like this. So we see they're very nice people. We also see that our dog friend, our dachshund friend, is watching to see what type of person this hobo is. So he's a cautious person.
But it hadn't been an inn when he'd left it in Oliver's care, and it certainly had not been automated. It had been a frightening folly built atop a granite mountain by Oliver and Wentworth's industrialist grandfather, the wicked Mars Kennewicket. Kennewickets tend to turn out generally good, or abominably evil. Oliver keeps a journal of his own, full of notes, observations, and theories about this family phenomenon. Wally worries about it. Sometimes I find him in front of the full-length mirror on Calypso's side of the lab, staring into his own green eyes. I know what he is thinking. He is pondering the conundrum of his kin. Which sort of Kennewicket am I going to be? A conundrum is a difficult problem or question, the kind Kennewickets love best. Wally's father is the generally good sort of Kennewicket. At least, he has been since he married Wally's mother. It was Calypso who had insisted that the cannons be removed from the Follies turret, and the chains taken out of the dungeons Mars had dug into the solid stone of the mountain. I felt this had been a step in the right direction. Letting Melvin, Prissy, and their pigeons stay, however, was a step in the wrong direction, even if their father did technically own the inn. The pigeons' presence gave Wally an excuse to spend. The hobo rubbed his chin, and I realized my mind had wandered far from the issue at hand. Was this the kind of hobo who would slip things into his pocket? I had just decided that he was the ordinary, honest sort when I noticed his boots. They were shiny beneath a thin film of dust. Too shiny. The cuffs of his trousers weren't torn either. He's wearing a disguise, I thought. Are you a pigeon fancier, sir? Asked Oliver Kennewicket, stepping into the room. Wally and Calypso were right behind him. Walter Kennewicket does not look like either of his parents. Oliver is tall and dark, with flashing black eyes. Calypso is fair and elegant in every way. Wally is small for his age, and his hair is the color of new copper wire. A pigeon fancier? The hobo said, turning around. Not in the least. I had to wag. Pigeons engage in activities such as flying, eating bugs, and perching on high places. You'd never catch a dachshund doing such senseless things. How can we help you? Asked Calypso Kennewicket kindly. Breakfast, perhaps? A hot bath? We've no time for that, the hobo said. He took off his coat and hat. Wally gasped. Theodore Roosevelt! Mr. President! Oliver Kennewicket exclaimed. What an unexpected honor!
For those of you who do not know who Theodore Roosevelt is, he was a president of the United States in the early 1900s. So obviously him being disguised as a hobo would be very shocking and very surprising to the Kennewicket family. Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. I came in utmost secrecy, the president said. But how, sir? Oliver asked. And why? I was wondering that myself. By unmarked coach to the town in the valley below, then onward by foot, Mr. Roosevelt explained. But surely your coach could have dropped you at our door? Calypso queried. There were just 2 ways to get to our inn, which occupies a ledge high above the lovely town of Gasket Gully. You could come up the elevator Oliver had installed, which carries visitors from the train station to the cliff top, then have a pleasant stroll across the lawn to the front door. Or you could risk the harrowing road that Mad Mars's cannons had once looked over. Hobos most often made their way up the road. I feared an official trip might draw unwanted attention. The president looked grim. I need to speak to you before I risk summoning my coach. Is there somewhere safe we can converse? Calypso pulled the bell cord, and Gizmo stepped out of a secret door in the wall. Gizmo is Oliver and Calypso's most amazing invention. She may look like a pleasant maid, in a multi-pocketed apron, clockwork corset, and button boots. But Gizmo's mind is more than the sum of its cogs and wheels. It's packed with facts, diagrams for silly things like dirigibles, and useful things such as prize-winning cookie recipes. Gizmo is the housekeeper, governess, cook, and scientific assistant at the automated inn. Like our other large automatons, Gizmo is electrical. Her charging closet is cunningly concealed in the lobby, so she's always on hand. "We'll take tea in the private parlor, Gizmo," Calypso said.
Now remember, whenever you're reading these parts where they're saying in first person, remember that it is from the Dash Hound's point of view.
"Right away, madam," Gizmo replied. Ahem. The president looked pointedly at Walter. "I'm afraid we have a very delicate matter to discuss." "We keep no secrets from our son," Oliver Kennewicket said. "He is a scientist in training," Calypso explained. "Hair, Walter." Calypso believes that untidiness is an indication of a messy mind. She thinks the most important question a scientist can ask is this experiment elegant? Which is why Calypso's side of the lab is meticulously kept. Oliver produced a pocket comb and handed it to his son. Oliver believes that one should be prepared for every possibility. He thinks the most important question a scientist can ask is, what if? Which is why Oliver's pockets are always full of interesting and useful things. President Roosevelt looked from Calypso to Oliver, then nodded. Wally tidied his hair as we stepped into the private parlor. No one questioned whether or not I should come along, of course. Dachshunds are known for their discretion and their keen attendance to duty. Which is why, when I saw a dust bunny peeking out from behind a chair, I chased it across the carpet and under the couch before the president noticed. The job of Calypso's clockwork dust bunnies is cleaning the floors, bookshelves, and tabletops. They are supposed to hide when we have guests. It's my job to help them remember that. When I came out from under the couch, Mr. Roosevelt was standing, hands behind his back, staring out the wall-size parlor window. Oliver, Calypso, and Wally sat politely, waiting for him to speak. I walked over to see what he was looking at. Visitors always comment on the excellent view from this window. We could see Theoden McDivitt pedaling his velocipede down Gromit Street, far below in Gasket Gully. In the distance, past the rooftops of the town, the train trestle hung suspended high above the churning waters of the mighty Oblivion River. The president paced to the window at the far side of the room. The view from this one was not so nice. On the small lawn outside, Melvin was showing his pigeon coop to a rotund gentleman in a top hat. Even from behind, I recognized Mortimer McDivitt, the mayor of Gasket Gully. Melvin has political aspirations. That means he intends to run for office himself one day. In Melvin's case, it also means that he is much more likely to be nice to you if he thinks you are a very important person. Behind them, Prissy was attempting to teach her birds tumbling tricks. She had recently attended a circus and was contemplating life under the big top. "Are these your older children?" inquired Mr. Roosevelt. "Should we ask them in as well?" "Our niece and nephew," Calypso said. "And whether we should ask them in is a delicate question. Perhaps we should wait until we have heard your dilemma before we decide if they should be told." I agreed. Prissy Kennewicket cannot keep secrets. She never slips me scraps off the table either. Melvin only gives me the things he doesn't want to eat himself, like carrots or cabbage. Their annoying birds live on the lawn so that they won't make a mess of Oliver's experiments on the roof. Mr. Roosevelt watched Prissy do a somersault, then nodded thoughtfully and turned to survey the room. I saw the dust bunny zip out from under the couch, just as Gizmo entered with the tea and cookies. I was across the room in a flash. The dust bunny skittered between Gizmo's feet. Before I could get past the ambulatory automaton, the dastardly dust bunny had climbed up Calypso's skirt and hidden in her pocket. President Roosevelt took a seat. "The country needs your amazing brains, Kennewickets," he said as Gizmo filled his cup. "Our agents have uncovered the tracks of an unscrupulous organization." "An organization of evil scientists?" Wally asked hopefully. I growled. We had recently been reading an excellent book by Mr. Jules Verne that was full of evil scientists. "An organization of..." Mr. Roosevelt put his teacup down. "Magicians." Wally picked me up, and I settled beside him. "Magicians?" Calypso offered the president a cookie. "The kind with capes, canes, and hats?" "Precisely," he said, choosing a macaroon. "They call themselves the Mesmers, and we fear that they plan to take over the world." "Through the use of stage tricks and skullduggery?" Oliver asked. "Through the use of mind control," the president said grimly. Wally gasped. "The name Mesmer may be a reference to physician Franz Mesmer, 1734 to 1815, said Gizmo. Mesmer claimed to practice animal magnetism. "Of course," Oliver said. "Mesmer's theories led to the development of hypnotism." "Precisely," the president agreed. "The danger, I fear, is real. The Mesmers are targeting leaders of government, industry, and finance, confounding and controlling their minds. We've kept it quiet, but news stories are beginning to appear. Such as the tale of the Pasha, who leaped from a clock tower, flapping his arms as if he could fly."
So we can start to see why President Roosevelt would be so nervous about knowing where people, or having people know where he is. People are hypnotizing other politicians.
A pasha is an official of the Ottoman Empire. Pashas, princes, and prime ministers were all frequent visitors at the inn. Most of them seemed far too sensible to attempt flight. Theodore Roosevelt grimaced. "Edith, my wife, fears they might mesmerize me. Imagine the President of the United States, a puppet to some evil power." "The fiends!" Wally jumped out of his seat, nearly toppling me from the chair. "They must be foiled." Chapter 3. "Correct," the president concurred. "I'm here to ask your parents to become agents of the U.S. government, Walter." If Theodore Roosevelt had not been the president, I thought he would have made an excellent agent himself. Everyone knew he had the courage of a corsair and practiced the oriental art of judo in the hallowed halls of the White House. "Sit down, Walter," Calypso said. "I believe we need to hear more before any decisions are made." "Of course, Mother," Wally said, flushing. He sat down, and I crawled onto his lap. Our noble leader tapped his nose. The agent bit must be hush-hush, of course. "Why us?" Oliver asked. "Who better to expose tricks and skullduggery than our nation's top scientists?" said Mr. Roosevelt. "I feel you will be able to figure out how they are confounding minds in the Kremlin and eliminating leaders of the Ottoman Empire before they bring confusion to our own capital." Interesting. Calypso selected a cookie. "I've always felt I would excel at espionage." Espionage is gathering information that other people don't want you to have. It's what secret agents and spies do. I'm sure you would, dear, Oliver said. I've certainly never managed to keep anything from you. But isn't this a job for the Secret Service? Or perhaps the Pinkertons? The employees of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency are fearless fellows who spend their time pursuing evildoers. I am in the midst of a rather important experiment, Mr. President, Oliver explained. My husband is collaborating with Nikola Tesla, Calypso said, in an experiment that may make free and abundant electric power available to the entire world. Tesla is a brilliant man, the president admitted. I follow his experiments. Then you may be interested in a small demonstration. Oliver stood up. Gizmo? Gizmo stepped to the corner and unveiled a model of the automated inn, complete with sail-like lightning collectors, next to the gyrating generator on top. Everything is readied. Oliver circumnavigated the room, scuffing his boots on Calypso's fine Persian rug. And my equipment predicts an electrical disturbance in the atmosphere within 3 days. You mean a lightning storm carrying a charge, such as your boot soles are gathering from the carpet, the president guessed shrewdly. Your inn is positioned perfectly to collect atmospheric electrons at this altitude. I was impressed with our president yet again. Oliver's atmospheric experiments are aided by the fact that the automated inn is perched high on a precipice, even if it means we are far above such modern conveniences as telegraph wires. Oliver hopes to transmit power, Calypso said, over 1,000 miles through the Earth to a waiting receptor at Tesla's Colorado Springs experimental station. Here represented, Oliver pointed, by the minuscule amount of flash powder my assistant has just deposited on the opposite side of the room. Gizmo backed away from the smidgen of powder she had poured onto a tray. I hid my nose under Wally's arm. Oliver went on. Both the collector on the model and the receptor on the tray are connected to the solid marble floor beneath this rug, which in this case represents the Earth's crust, declared the president, leaping to his feet in the excitement of the moment. Oliver held his finger over the model of the inn, and a spark leaped from his fingertip to the electron collectors on top. Instantly, the flash powder on the opposite side of the room exploded in light. Bravo! President Roosevelt waved away the subsequent smoke. You've blown up Tesla's lab. That was merely for visual effect, sir, said Gizmo. No actual labs will be harmed in the experiment. At least, not if all goes as planned, added Calypso, though Oliver does love a good explosion. Don't we all? Mr. Roosevelt exclaimed as they settled into their seats once more. It's brilliant, of course. And yet difficult choices must be made. Your country is in danger, Kennewickets. Oliver's point, Mr. President, Calypso interjected, is that science is not something one can simply walk away from. Each experiment takes planning and preparation. Asking him to leave just now is like asking a farmer to abandon his fields, just as his crops are ready to be harvested. It would be wasting an entire year of preparation. Calypso is expecting a trainload of guests tomorrow as well, Oliver added. A convention of popcorn vendors and Professor Potts, the world's foremost expert on the cultivation and popping of corn. Calypso's practical inventions not only made the world a better place, they also provided the Kennewickets with funding for further scientific research. We are expecting 19 vendors, said Calypso. They are interested in my newly developed lightning-fast popcorn popper, suitable for spectacles and special events. Potts will be presenting a series of talks, and I have promised a demonstration of the device. Mr. Roosevelt looked from Oliver to Calypso. I could tell he was thinking that they were an amazing team. Perhaps we could wait to become agents, Oliver suggested. Just for a few days, until the convention is over and the storm is past. Everyone was silent for a heartbeat, and then Wally stood up again, still holding me tight. Is there something you'd like to say, Walter? Calypso asked. Yes, Mother. Wally's face flushed. I feel that protecting the president is our higher duty. I can observe and record Father's data. I wagged my tail. Wally is very responsible when he isn't inventing. You can count on me as well, Master and Madam, Gizmo said. I am wired for patriotism. This sounded promising. Gizmo often ran the inn while the Kennewickets were away on scientific expeditions. We did have an excellent, if automated, staff. Mr. Jones will be stopping by as well, Gizmo went on. He can assist if there is anything amiss with the machinery. I wagged and wiggled. Mr. Jones is the exceptional engineer who drives the train to Kennewicket Station. He's practically part of the family. Mr. Jones and Gizmo share blueprints and secret cookie recipes. He and Oliver share intelligence and occasional conspiracy theories. Calypso says that if Mr. Jones wrote novels, he'd be better than Mr. Verne. Oliver says the fact that Mr. Jones has never once been right doesn't mean he never will be. I say that Mr. Jones is an outstanding friend. He would certainly lend assistance if any device needed mending in Oliver and Calypso's absence. And he makes superb snickerdoodles. Oliver nodded. I applaud your sentiments, son, he said slowly. And yours as well, Gizmo. I don't like the sound of these menacing Mesmers either. Still, this is a difficult decision. Son, would you take Mr. Roosevelt on a tour while your mother, Gizmo, and I discuss this development? Bully, the president said, by which he meant, splendid, I'd love a tour. Walter, Calypso said, as we reached the door, let's not discuss the menace outside this room. Yes, Mother, said Wally, as he motioned for me and the president to step into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind us.
Okay, so we just finished chapter 3 of Mesmer Menace. So after this, you're going to go do a discussion over the Menace, and it will have a lot of questions on there to think about. If you'd like to review any of this story is on your HMH account, so you can read back through if you have any questions. If not, go to your discussion post and complete that. Thank you.